I'm Shawna Rosner, your host of In-House Counsel Chronicles. Today, my guest is Alisha Cieslak. Alisha graduated from Wayne State University School of Law. She started her legal career in private practice and moved in-house shortly thereafter and has worked in-house for 15 years. Currently, she is Chief Legal and Risk Officer with Gordon Food Service, a fifth-generation family-managed food service distributor with over 23 billion in revenue and 23,000 employees across North America. Welcome to the podcast, Alisha.
Thank you so much for having me, Shawna. Happy to be here.
I'm excited for our conversation today. First off, I want to ask you, what made you decide to go to law school?
I was actually part of a program called Close Up, which is a civics or government introductory course for high school students. And instantly, I was just enamored by democracy, the institutions. We went to Washington, D.C. on a trip. And from there, I was sold. And we watched an oral argument in the Supreme Court. And I distinctly remember Justice Scalia spinning in his chair with his back toward us when everybody else was facing toward us. And I said, that guy has style. And I think from there, I was just laser focused on learning anything and everything I could about history, government, the rule of law. And that's when I decided, and I was probably 14 or 15 years old, where a lot of young people think about very early what college they're going to, maybe what major. But I had decided then and I never changed my mind.
I love that you had that exposure at that young age and really followed that path. What made you go in-house from private practice, and how to make that move from private practice to in-house?
During college, I worked for a complex civil litigation firm. It was my first semester. One day a week, I was answering phones, filing, and I really got exposed to kind of a small to medium size practice. And ultimately, when I graduated, I thought I would be a litigator. And that's what I did. It was during that experience I realized there's so many things that can be prevented with good processes, policies, forms, templates on the front end that would avoid litigation on the back end. And ultimately, I started to think if I could go in-house, I could save a lot of money from clients in litigation. I could save a lot of headache and heartache. A lot of my clients were small to medium-sized businesses as well as larger institutions. And so I started networking and talking to folks that I thought may have some exposure to in-house practice. I was introduced to Bentler by somebody who had actually applied for a role, didn't get it, but they said, hey, there's someone over here you might want to take a look at. And that's how I learned about the opportunity and ultimately obtained a role as the company's first American lawyer, first hire outside of Europe.
Tell us about that company a little bit.
Bentler is what I would call one of the largest privately held companies you've probably never heard of unless you are in the automotive industry or the oil and gas industry. It's been around for over 120 years, similar to Gordon Food Service in that respect. Family owned, very successful in reinventing itself. They are master metallurgists, engineers, always thinking about new solutions to modern problems. So in my time at Bentler, I was hired after what the rest of the world knows as the mortgage crisis, but we in Michigan call the automotive crisis. So all of the distressed supplier situations, OEM bankruptcies, they were really looking for someone who could help them establish an office. And so I was hired by a German expatriate who's still a very close friend. And he and I worked through a lot of complex, difficult situations during that time. We also established the first regional legal department for Bentler. and really helped to bring that region of the company back to profitability after all of the really challenging years of the crisis. It was when he left and went back to Germany at the end of his contract that they were seeking someone to step in as the North American General Counsel. And ultimately, they selected me to take that role. I was quite young, I would say, to take a role of that significance, but I had established a lot of trust with the leadership in the region. And I think they were willing to take a risk and a bet, and I think it paid off. I think they would say it paid off.
How long were you there?
So I was there, I want to say almost 5 years. And in that role, no, a little less than 5 years, I would say. So in that director role, director of legal affairs, I continued on the path of what I kind of described in leading all of the legal matters, the compliance matters, the insurance matters. We also had a really significant site selection and government incentive project to find the first steel and tube mill outside of Europe for the steel and tube division, which ultimately landed in Shreveport, Louisiana. So I worked a lot on the construction, insurance agreements, safety protocols, procedures, things like that. And then I got a call from someone who knew Gordon Food Service was looking to establish its first legal department. And I had some contact with law firms in West Michigan where Gordon Food Service is based. And similar story, they said, we're looking for a different kind of lawyer who's also a leader. And this firm said, hey, you ought to take a look at Alisha and what she's done at Bentler. And I think she could really provide some value to you. So it was 2013, I began those conversations. And in early 2014, I started with Gordon Food Service.
Do you think that it was just coincidence that both companies were family run, family owned?
Yes and no. I think one of the important things when you're working for a family owned business, a privately held business, is there's differences certainly with publicly traded companies. You're not beholden to shareholders, quarterly financials. You can make the right decision, the right long-term decisions versus what's less expensive or less controversial to shareholders. So the way that you lawyer is different also. And that really aligned with my personal value set, making good, high integrity decisions. So I think that was one thing. The other thing is, at the end of the day, these companies are owned by families and there's family names. And I take very seriously protecting the reputation and the legacy of those families who have created millions of jobs for people, solved big societal problems, provided tremendous value in their respective industries. And so I think, hopefully the Gordon family saw that when they brought me on.
Tell me about what personal or leadership obstacles you had to overcome to get to where you are today.
I think every person has many of those. And in my individual case, I was a relatively young lawyer who took on that North American General Counsel role and ultimately the General Counsel role at Gordon Food Service. And I think at that time, I felt like I really had something to prove. And a lot of folks who take on new roles feel like they have something to prove, particularly that first general counsel job. And I had a really great mentor in the CEO, Rich Walowski, who said, hey, look, like, don't boil the ocean, one thing at a time. You have a lot of ideas, a ton of energy, but remember, the business also has many other priorities. And so you have to think about what is the most important thing to the business right now and focus on those problems. And the rest may be risk or they may be inefficiencies, but you can kind of prioritize them. And that was really impactful advice to me. The other thing was I sort of used that youth as it was a little bit of a chip on my shoulder, honestly, until I figured out how to use it to my advantage. So what I mean by that is I was underestimated a lot. There are a lot of people who probably thought this lady is not going to last 12 years in this role. I also was someone who really leaned into technology before many other legal department leaders did. And so one of the early things I did was try to network a little bit with other general counsel in the area. And I wanted to learn from them as I took on this new role. And I think what several of them would say is they started to learn from me how to utilize technology in their in house practice. And we've introduced industry leading contract lifecycle management, automation, now AI in our practice. And we're nationally recognized for that, which I think was something that somebody with a different set of experience may not have been open to.
I really appreciate that you're sharing this. As you know, I'm a legal recruiter and I talk to so many junior attorneys, I would say several every single day, who want to make that move in house and want to know when is the right time to do that in their careers. You manage a really large team. I think about 200 is.
Well, in addition to my general counsel responsibilities, a couple years into my career, I was asked to oversee corporate affairs and communications. And from there, I was also tasked with the enterprise risk management program. And one of the things with the enterprise risk management program was it started to reveal emerging risks where we didn't really have a department or a structure to address those issues. And so our ERM program sort of became an incubator for how do we address those risks. In some cases, it was a project or a strategy. In some cases, we stood up a new department. And so one of those risks back in 2015 was cybersecurity and data privacy. We said this is really quickly evolving. And I think we all know now we get constant things in the mail about data breaches and security incidents from any number of companies. And so we said we don't want to be one of those, and we really need a robust leading edge security program. And so I was asked to lead that and build that, which we have and have done. In addition, over time, I was asked to take on occupational health and safety, transportation compliance, sustainability, food safety and quality. Portfolio grew quite large. One of the things I would say is while it feels perhaps a bit disparate, there is a common thread, and that is these are all highly regulated areas and require keen understanding of what those regulations are and then how to translate those into building compliant programs for the business. So it's quite a large portfolio, and many a days, sometimes I say, I just want to be a lawyer again because there are no shortage of challenges that arise. That's for certain.
So you've had two different roles at Gordon, correct? You started in a general counsel seat.
Began my career as the general counsel. And through that process I just described, I was promoted to the chief legal and risk officer. And so it began really as team of one, a lawyer of one, and we built together with the team that I selected and brought on really a full service functioning legal team. And then as those additional responsibilities were added, I was promoted into the chief legal and risk officer role. And then from a leadership standpoint, that role required I begin to lead leaders, which was a new challenge for me. So they don't teach leadership skills often in law school. You're taught to think like a lawyer. And so if there's advice that I give to anyone who's listening, it's really thinking about how do you develop those leadership skills early on. I had certainly plenty of experiences in my youth with clubs and sports and things of that nature. But that was something I really started to reflect on, self study, learn through experience, and certainly made my share of mistakes. But one of the greatest gifts that Gordon Food Service gave me was the lesson around servant leadership. And the concept of servant leadership is that it's no longer about you. It's about how do you remove obstacles for your team, give them the resources they need to succeed. How do you share credit and take the blame when things go wrong. And in some ways, it's freeing because it's no longer about your individual accomplishments or achievements, but about the collective effect and impact that team makes on the organization. And I'm really proud of the teams at Gordon Food Service under my umbrella because they're really just a fantastic group of people.
Tell us how you've seen the role of a general counsel evolve over time.
Certainly, my own example is one I can reflect on. So, the general counsel, I think the old image was the attorney at the end of their career who wanted to kind of quote slow down. They would farm everything out to outside counsel, and they would just sort of liaise with the board and senior management. And I would say that is not the case at any company or organization with whom I interact. I would say that the role is both hands on in many respects, but it's also eyes on. It is in the weeds on some matters and then highly strategic on others. It's no longer about pure technical legal skills. It's about leadership, both of the function and the organization. It's about business acumen and alignment to business strategy and outcomes. It's about learning how to pick and choose the right legal resources on the outside, commensurate with the complexity of the matter. So it isn't just choosing and sending everything to them. It's thinking about how do I allocate finite resources to the problem that is in front of me. And then it's also kind of that conscience of the organization when all is sort of in the boiling pot and tensions are high and you have to achieve results, and it's making sure that people act consistent with the organization's values, ethos, ethics, even when things get hard. And then I would say the enterprise risk role really was one that fell under legal but is innate in any general counsel today. You need to be thinking about what are the problems of tomorrow while you're also dealing with the matters of today. What can come, looking around corners, trying to help prepare the organization, not just by telling them what the law is or the risk is, but bringing together stakeholders to build response teams, understand what the impact is to the business of those risks, and really helping the organization lead through those things.
I want to stay focused for a minute on the business side of things. What do you see are the most pressing risks and issues facing businesses today? And how are you in your role addressing them?
I think the number one issue everyone is talking about is AI. And AI is for lawyers both scary and threatening and also very promising and exciting, both in how lawyers practice, but how businesses intend to realize the promise of AI. So, one of the things that I talk with my colleagues about at other organizations is how can legal be sort of front and center in the conversations about AI? There's, traditional thinking would say this is an IT function, but legal can be, and we've developed a program to be a convener of the people who are interested in utilizing different AI tools, can help define the parameters within which those tools can be used safely, and not just indiscriminately. We established a AI Center of Excellence, so a team of, I think, 25 people, where that becomes sort of the safe sandbox to experiment within the parameters that we've all collectively agreed upon. And in that way, it doesn't feel like legal is saying what you can and cannot do with AI. It's giving you the freedom within a framework to explore AI without necessarily introducing risk from, a large language model data privacy leakage issue.
This is so interesting and relevant. While I do legal placements, I now have a colleague who is working on placing legal technology positions. So this is so interesting to hear that overlap.
And every sort of new job posting that I see is really for a technology centered lawyer. And traditionally, when I started in automotive, when we talked about technology lawyers, it was patent lawyers who worked for automotive companies, software. And now this is really a whole new arena. And again, they don't teach it in law school. So, how does one learn about this? Well, advice to young lawyers, if anyone's listening, is there's a million and one things that are offered through universities online for free that educate you about AI issues, data privacy issues. Certainly, all the big legal research companies like Thomson Reuters have all sorts of articles giving you overviews of the issues that may arise in this context. But more than understanding what the law is, educating yourself about the tools, the technology, what's possible, because oftentimes we're in a position to say probably won't work. But if we can also bring solutions to say, but this might, I think builds a ton of credibility with the business or the client.
That's really great information to have, particularly relevant, as I said, at this time.
Yes.
I want to ask you about an accomplishment that you are most proud of from your in house career.
I mentioned the concept of servant leadership before, and results are really important still in the context of servant leadership. And I've achieved many favorable results for all of the clients I've worked with throughout my career. But those aren't the things that I'm most proud of. The thing I'm most proud of is the investment in the lawyers and the leaders behind me, and watching them grow, mature, change, evolve into who they are today is incredibly rewarding. One of my colleagues, we graduated in the same class year. He was my first legal hire at Gordon Food Service. And he's just a tremendously gifted lawyer. But now he's also a really spectacular people leader, a patient teacher, someone who has just earned trust from his internal clients and leadership. And that is through really intentional investment in his development, as well as giving him opportunities to work directly with senior leadership on matters that I knew he was more than capable in doing. That it would have been easy for me to say, no, I'll take that, or I'll be the one to report out on that. But for me, I think giving them the tools and resources in the background to allow them moments to shine and get exposure, and then those people being recognized and rewarded for it is just extremely rewarding to me.
I could see where you're such a good servant leader for sure. If you were to go back in time and to give yourself advice after graduating from law school, what would it be?
I think the advice I would give is it's a marathon, not a sprint. So I have enjoyed just an incredible amount of success early in my career and very quick career progression. And I find myself now saying, okay, what's the right way for me to continue to make a meaningful impact? It's a very privileged place to be. I recognize to say I've achieved almost everything I set out to. And now I'm thinking, okay, well, what does that mean for the next 25 years that I hope to work? And so, that didn't come easily. It came with a tremendous amount of personal sacrifice, nights, weekends, holidays. I abandoned a lot of things, to do that. And, I would have told myself it's okay to take your time. It's okay to have a full life around the career. It's okay to define success for yourself. And what I mean by that, and I often speak to groups within the company, outside the company. Most recently, I spoke to our Women in Transportation Employee Resource Group. And I said, define success on your own terms. Maybe success is I'm a manager of people and I'm okay being a manager. I don't need to be a senior executive if it means that I get a workout in every day and I'm healthy and I'm there for my kids and I get to go home at night and shut the computer down and that's it. It doesn't necessarily have to be the top job unless that's what you really want and understand what that really means. So I would have told myself, really think about how you define success on your own terms, and it's okay to be patient to get there.
Thank you for that advice. I can really relate to it. I know others will also. It's been such a pleasure having you on today. Our time is up. You've had such a great career so far. I love hearing about it, and I can't wait to follow the rest. Thanks so much for being my guest today, Alisha.
Thank you so much for having me.